Okay, so we're starting this live stream. I'm Jim Tolles, and we're talking about all about spiritual awakening. I'm just giving people time, the chance to log on. Should be an interesting experience. Let's see how everything works. So as always, just taking a few minutes here to just breathe in and breathe out, relaxing. And taking time to come back to yourself. I'm sure you've had busy days. Just breathing in and breathing out. Softening the shoulders, letting the mind relax. There's no rush. We rush a lot in this culture. Breathing in and breathing out. We're just taking our time tonight. No rush to get anywhere. Just breathing in, breathing out. Relaxing the jaw, relaxing the shoulders. Letting go of the mind. Oh, says like we've got some viewers coming in. Maybe this is just kind of slow and getting started. I don't know. So welcome for those who are signing on. If somebody can just type in the chat pod, it should be on the right-hand side. Just say hi, I can hear you. And yeah, I'm kind of figuring this out. This is the first time I've really kind of used this tool more broadly. I used it once before. So I want to see how well this does for, maintaining interaction with each other. Yeah, so if anybody could just say hi. It should be in the upper right-hand side of the screen. There should be a place to put your chat. just not sure what's going on. It's kind of one of the strange things about doing these types of online things. It's like you only hear yourself. So and of course, in this particular tool, I don't see any of you. It's kind of hidden from me, other than the fact that I know that there are 8 viewers here, and I don't know who they are. As I said, if somebody could just type in the group chat, it's on the right-hand side of the screen. Just say hello. All right, fantastic. Thank you, Jason. I'm wondering about if there's kind of a delay to this too, because it just seems like everything's a little bit slower. And anyway, too, I would appreciate any sort of feedback on like video quality or audio quality, because as I said, I'm just kind of looking at myself. So if anybody can't hear me at any given point, or if this is kind of not as good of a tool as the other webinar stuff I've been using, please let me know. I'm wondering if some of the load times are kind of slow for it. Okay. I'm getting emails that people can hear and see me. It's like, shouldn't be getting email faster than like the chat pod should be loading on the on the screen. Well, let's give this thing a shot, right? As with other things, the way you can like interact with me is to put in questions in the chat pod, which hopefully should load sooner. And who knows, maybe it's just as different depending on the browser you're using. I'm going to be talking all about spiritual awakening tonight, our favorite topic and our topic du jour. So I definitely encourage you to ask questions as we go, and I'll do my best to answer them, assuming that the technology keeps working. So all about spiritual awakening. I always like to start this topic by simply expanding our frame of reference. We spend a lot of time thinking about it in terms of it's just like one term that we use over and over again, and we use it for lots of different things, as opposed to like really thinking about what does spiritual awakening mean to us. So hang on, I'm just kind of adjusting some other stuff. This is doing the wrong camera, I just realized. Let's see, that should be a little bit better. Okay, that just made video quality a lot better. So anyway, lots of hitches and starts. As I said, it's a new technology, and I want to see how well I like this compared to other webinar services. What's nice about using this on YouTube, I know I'm stepping away from the awakening thing for a brief second, forgive me for that, is that this automatically is going to upload to my video channel. So all this is going to be immediately available basically after this, and I don't have to do any additional uploading. So that's kind of nice. Okay, so spiritual awakening. Starting again, focusing. With spiritual awakening, we use it as kind of a catch-up of spiritual terms for like every kind of change that happens inside of us, or little epiphanies, or big realizations, or major revelations, and so on and so forth. So I like to expand our frame of reference. I think our vocabulary on spirituality in this regard and how we change in the internal landscape is rather small in English. Maybe it's better in other languages. I think that's how we end up in other languages, co-opting different terms, because we're trying to figure out how to explain this amazing levels of interchange that we can have. I use spiritual awakening as kind of one term under the umbrella term of spiritual shift. Spiritual shifts can really be anything from a minor realization where you realize that you need to eat more eggplant in your diet to be healthier, to the more earth-shattering revelations where you realize that you've never done something you ever really cared about or liked in your life. Right? People have these realizations. And with spiritual awakening, where something moves inside and suddenly you're just connected to this space, the space of isness. Isness is the term I just said. And it's just so alive and so there, and it can be very understated, but from that amazingly understated space inside, amazingly powerful things arise from it. And that tends to have certain things that grow up, like a deeper sense of peace, of oneness, of wholeness, of love, of clarity about what is real. And so that's usually what I mean when I say spiritual awakening. And the thing about that space is a very fertile, alive space, and it's kind of starts to grow and change you. And in growing and changing you, lots of things move, lots of things change on their own, almost seemingly. It's just we feel like we're kind of drugged along by this current. And this is the big distinction, and I make it because so much what the rest of people on what I call the conscious path, where we gradually get to know ourselves, and this is a true for a spiritual awakening person, but without the awakening, without that kind of inner drive that just starts to push you through issues that you wouldn't have seen, wouldn't have realized you even had, the tendency is we need to cultivate space to intensify our inner fire, to really build up enough stuff going on inside, start to kind of get that inner flow that you already have moving on its own. Otherwise, there's a tendency for us to just kind of stay in our patterns. And it's very human, it's very normal to want to just kind of stay in our patterns. And that's one of the things that makes spiritual awakening so sacred, is it takes you out of your patterns. And it forces you to see how unhealthy a lot of those patterns are. Some ideas and some ways of behaving may seem healthy at first, but maybe only healthy in some situations. So, for example, this kind of very dedicated person who never wants to quit, there are times when we need to quit. So the pattern of like always working through it and striving and that type of thing can be very healthy in some regards. And spiritual awakening can start to show you when to use that and when you can't use that. And that can be very upsetting for our ego. It's also like, no, I want to do it this way, behave a certain way, and all that. And that's just not true to our human experience for a lot of us, that we have to be more malleable, and awakening is malleable. And I really want you to think about that, in terms of human life, this malleability, flexibility, adaptability. And it's more than the go with the flow, because the go with the flow can be just kind of like what's easiest for us. And there's plenty of our ego selves that look for the easiest route rather than the route that's most true. Sometimes the route that's most true is not the easiest route. So that's one of the ways that we make a distinction, that the deeper flow doesn't look for necessarily human ease, which is quite upsetting to a lot of people, because that's what more of us really want. And this is another reason why I make these distinctions, is because the spiritual awakening is not going to be considerate to your ideas around convenience or how life should go. And that can be really upsetting at first. Later on in the trajectory of change and growth, as we heal things inside of us, we start to realize what a gift it was to have this huge push, this huge kick in the butt, to go through a whole lot of crap that otherwise we would never have done. And I know for myself personally, there are a whole lot of things and issues that I had no idea existed. I never would have gone looking for them. I wouldn't have known to look for them. So just pausing for a quick second, if everybody just wants to take another deep breath or two, to just allow yourself to settle, but for those who start to think, you drop into this stuff, and not to think too much. There's a space of energy in talks like this that we share together. And so the more you can drop into yourself, the more you can kind of tune into that energy and allow it to move you. Because while awakening does come for very, very few people, we all have access to that deep, beautiful isness, that place of presence inside that wants to move you. But if you just give it some space, it will try and start to move you a little bit in ways that you can't yet imagine. And I want to encourage you to see how open and how relaxed you can be to yourself, not necessarily even to me. I have no agenda in making you be any particular way. That's just not how it is. It's not what I do for a hobby. What I want to help you do is to understand yourselves and to create the best practices for yourself. So when I talk about spiritual awakening, I make these distinctions. Sometimes people have that ego self say, no, well, I'm awakened. His definition is wrong, which of course is the ego self trying to hold on to something. I make these distinctions to help you understand yourself, to help you find the tools for your practice that are most suited to you. And so the reason that I make this distinction in awakening is because when that inner flow is moving, You engage with it in a different way to when it isn't. Because when it isn't, and this is how most of what I've seen a lot of spiritual practices that are interested in light and awakening in any sort of way, they're all about amping up the energy, getting you started, building the fire, right? Getting the forge hot to get started. But once you're started and you're flowing, it's a different thing now. And how we paddle on that inner river, I know flip-flopping out, of course, and how we paddle on that inner river is very, very different. I mean, there's certainly similarities around being present. A lot of the same tools apply. But when I go into meditation, it's not necessarily to amp up my system and to really look within in the same way that it might have been before awakening. The way, that I just kind of open and allow my energy to kind of arrange itself in a certain way. It's a very distinct and different thing. And once again, it doesn't mean that people who haven't awakened don't have access to it. That's one of the great, beautiful aspects of this path, is that we all have access to it. But there tends to be just so much illusion, so much commitment to pain, and so much commitment to all these other things that they take the front seat and the back seat and the trunk and the top of the car and the roof of the car and the undercarriage of the car. They just, everything is so jammed up that flow doesn't appear to be accessible, even if it's already there. Versus when the awakening arises and it just starts to push everybody out of the car that doesn't belong there. For anyone just joining, hopefully there's a chat pod that's loading on the right hand side, or is there, and that's where you can put questions. And if you just want to say hi real quick, to let me know that you're here, that's great. I think thus far only one person succeeded at doing that, which is not making me too thrilled with this kind of tool that we're using. So after awakening, a whole bunch of things happen. It's usually healing first. You're going to hear me usually talk in terms of healing and spiritual growth. If a leg is broken, you have to heal it before you can run. So there's healing, and then there's growth, right? The running part. And I like to make these distinctions just to, once again, appreciate the tools that we need in a given time. A lot of times people think they're ready to run immediately after awakening because you get this amazing hit. At least some people do. It's a little bit different for everyone, but a lot of times just this understanding what's real. And that can excite a lot of enthusiasm, and a lot of people's like, okay, now I know what I need to do and where I want to go. And it's just somebody who's kind of trying to suddenly sprint while having been crippled for forever, and they have to address the pains and the things that have, cause all these bones to break and all these muscles to atrophy before they can even do that. And of course, in some cases, people want to tell other people how to live, which is definitely not something that I really recommend. The more we open up, and if you are ever called to help others, there really is more of an inviting space rather than a speaking at space. And that may seem a little ironic in doing a spiritual talk like this, but you're all here by choice. And so it's a little bit different thing how we create invitations to share in this space. And the initial invitation upon awakening is to go within, to start to really see what's going on. And for some people, there's just this rush of all this upset energy and all these pains and things that you've never dealt with before. So the encouragement is to start to look at what is coming up, not to try and rush through. And unfortunately, in the beginning, that's when we feel the worst. And it tends to trigger our need to run away or to get through it or to fight it off the hardest. Not always, but it tends to. And that's, of course, a problem, because if you're busy trying to get through it or run away from it or avoid it, you're not really engaging with it. And so the healing doesn't really necessarily work as well as it might otherwise, as opposed to when you're focused and you say, no, this is a good thing. I'm going to engage with this thing, this big, amazing change that's arising inside myself. And I'm going to see what's going to flow through it, what's going to arise out of it, and how I'm going to be changed by it. And I know a lot of it has to do with just culturally. Nobody knows what this is. And that's why, at the beginning, I often start to create this new vocabulary. So in addition to spiritual awakening and spiritual shift, and spiritual shift, as I said, is kind of my overarching term, I offer you the idea of kind of low, medium, and high level understandings or changes in what you understand about life. And so I typically call this a spiritual epiphany. So just like the small little thing of like, oh, here's this thing that I need to change about myself, or this truth about how I was raised, or this about mom, or right, something small. not necessarily earth-shattering, but it starts to change your perspective, and that may change your heart. It may arise different actions out of that, but maybe not. It's an epiphany, small thing. The next one up is really spiritual realization, is the term I use. And with a spiritual realization, there's a little bit more to it, a little bit more emphasis, a little bit more energy moves inside you, like, woof, I just realized this thing about this relationship I've been in. I've been creating this whole story about this person, and that story doesn't exist. And now I'm faced with the reality of this partnership that I'm in. It's like, who is this? Right? And it can be so strange for a lot of people who've been in a relationship for 20 years. You have an awakening, and then you're looking at this partner saying, who is this? And then the spiritual revelation to me is the biggest one on the scale. And that's when things really hit you, in the gut. You're like, I have to leave this job, right? Or something like that. Just give you that sense of like, just on a physical level, it is time to make a change. Like your world has changed. And I like to offer these low, medium, high terms, just to help you understand all the different ways that you can shift internally. Right? And these three are going to come a lot in the spiritual awakening. But while the awakening kind of gives you that initial hit, that initial rush, and it stays with you. It doesn't go away. The human experience changes, but the space of presence, which is always with us, definitely stays with you in a way that I can't fully describe. Because you know it's there even when things are just awful and erupting inside of you. And so from that continued eruption come more epiphanies and realizations, even the big revelations. And it's just kind of like stepping out of this illusion. But it's almost like you're walking backwards. You're never exactly sure what you're stepping out of until you step through that next doorway. And then you can see like the structure you were imprisoned in. Like, oh crap, how long was I in there? And then you keep stepping, and then usually right when you get to the next wall, there's that sense of like fear. And a lot of these principles apply to anyone, regardless of awakening. So whenever you start to step out of an old pattern, an old unhealthy way of being, fear and anger and sadness and things start to kind of level up as you go. And then you start to, once you step through it and you drop out of that space and that sort of energetic feeling, like, wow, what was happening? It's like, how did I live that way? And then of course you feel clearer and you have more space that you can move in your life, which is really one of the beautiful parts of the spiritual awakening. One of the challenges many people have is around being free. But you really can't do anything. And this isn't said from an ego perspective. The ego, when we say we can do everything well, I'll just go stab and kill and steal. It's like, it's this very ignorant sort of a thing. It uses that hyperbole to confuse you about certain things and certain truths about the spiritual path. And one of those truths is it tends to be that we don't want to hurt others because we're all one. So hurting another hurts ourselves. Hurting ourselves hurts another. So sharing and passing on that sort of suffering and pain, it doesn't really come up into your mindset. There's very few situations where that's something that you really want to do. And so you typically don't even think about that. It's the freedom of like, you can be anybody, personalities or egos are all made up. You can go do whatever occupation you want. You can engage with whatever person you want. All the rules that we created unconsciously as we grow up through our lives, are suddenly shown to be ridiculous and useless, that you don't have to do anything. And that's such a hugely encouraging thing, but at the same point, then there's this huge expanse in your life. It's like, well, where do I go? If I can do any job, then which one do I choose? How do I find direction now? And it's kind of one of those funny ways where we like the ego because it gave us direction. And go this way to be successful. It's one of the things the ego says, or go this way to be safe. Safe and successful are often the same thing for the ego, because the ego's real primary agenda is around safety for most people. Emotional safety, physical safety. I mean, most things ultimately come down to a sense of physical safety, but we're really terrified of our own emotions too. So all this space starts to arise in your life, or rather, you start to realize it was already there. And you're just stepping out of those different veils, those different illusions, past those different walls. The awakening just feels like you're kind of being pushed out. And that doesn't necessarily last forever. I don't know that I would say that it couldn't. But my experience, what I've seen from others, is things calm down as you've embraced, as you've changed. Once you've healed a broken bone, you don't need to heal it again. Now, there is an interesting thing around old trauma, old pain that's stuck inside, which is a different sort of thing of clearing out space. And that tends to kind of come up unwanted and suddenly an awakening. And that can be very shocking for some people. So they have kind of like this well of poison just explode out of them for no apparent reason and not knowing what it is. And that would be in the case where, it's a repressed memory. And that happens a lot. That, if somebody awakens, there's repressed trauma, it comes up. But even if you know what the trauma is, oftentimes nobody, or I don't want to say nobody, but a lot of people haven't reckoned with the emotional qualities of it and the physical and energetic qualities. Maybe they've worked through the mind, say, like, I know I had this really oppressive father, it's very emotionally abusive. And so conceptually you work that through, but you may find out that your heart hasn't worked it through. All the feelings of betrayal and anger and fear, that were associated in that relationship, then they start to work themselves out. And it can be very physiological. If there's any physical abuse, your body may kind of relive some of that as it's letting go of that energy. So that's another aspect of the healing that often arises after awakening. But as I said, things do heal. And eventually we kind of move towards what's more spiritual growth rather than spiritual healing. This space of, okay, now that there's openness, now that there's space, what starts to arise out of me? And with that arising also comes the tendency to move out of the comfort zone further and to stretch yourself in a different way. As a spiritual teacher, I very much am still growing and changing. And so I'm still stretching past a lot of ego ideas and boundaries and running up against cultural ideas that, may or may not like how I am because I'm not conforming to social roles in the way that I would have in the past. And that's a different type of growth, a different type of stretching. It has a different feel and quality to it. And at times it's going to take you actually to some of your more core issues when you get into growth. And so there's a way where we heal and then we expand and then we come back down to like these next things that are broken or unhealthy inside. And a lot of times as we move more into this growth phase, which I tend to call embracing your light. The first phase I really tend to call dispelling the darkness, right? That's our ignorance, and that's very much about the healing as well, because ignorance is a type of sickness for the mind, where we're not seeing the truth or seeing fantasies, and a lot of it's self-imposed ignorance more than we realize. So moving over into embracing your light, you start to potentially run into deeper issues that are blocking you from growing into things that feel most true to you. And everybody is different how they're going to step into a phase like that. And once again, I'm making up a lot of this stuff, so it may not move exactly like this for you. It's not the point. The point is to offer you some understanding, some way to kind of grapple with something that's very amorphous. It's not a solid thing. It's such a unique thing. That's why I often use plant metaphors that, going through the darkness phase when you sprout as a seed, right? You're going through darkness blindly. It's a slightly different metaphor. And then you come into the light, but then you're not done, right? If you're a corn plant, a pumpkin plant, a redwood tree, a spruce tree, right? They're all going to grow differently. So how they embrace that light phase and how long they live and how far they reach their arms out to embrace life is dramatically different. It's no better or worse. It's just different. So I want you to kind of think like a plant, and as you're growing, what that's looking like for you, and that forces you, I think, to stay in tune with yourself, with what is right for you, rather than what is somebody else telling you should be. Because that's how we start off for the most part, is people tell us what we should be. We should be this way. We should act that way. This is how you be successful. You're only successful if you're a carpenter, married, have 3 kids, right? These types of things get told to us overtly or, are implied. And we learn so much by watching what other people are doing. You will very likely continue to come up against the fear of the unknown wherever you are in your path, awakened or not. Because it's such a deep-seated core fear. I mean, it's kind of funny, like things do continue to get simpler. That's another aspect of spiritual awakening, the spiritual path in general. You'll notice things tend to simplify. If they don't simplify, if they're getting more complicated, start to question it. Start to say, what's going on here? If you suddenly find that you're having to have more and more expansive belief systems for everything, be curious. Start to ask, what's happening here? Because beliefs are very much of the ego world, right? The ego thinks that if you create enough beliefs, you're going to keep yourself safe. And this causes people a whole lot of problems when something that goes counter to their belief happens. Like anytime a major natural disaster happens to somebody and they say, how could this happen? How could this happen to me? Because I had a belief that it shouldn't, because the divine loved them better, or they did all these practices in a certain way or whatnot, right? So this is a way where beliefs start to be shown to be, in many respects, frauds. A belief should only ever be useful and as a tool for freeing ourselves. If it becomes entrapping, says, no, you can only be this way, we have to start questioning it. Things like being kind, we realize, something like that, that's a shifting thing, isn't it? It's like, what is kindness, when your 3-year-old is throwing a tantrum? It's different than when you are out on an amazing date with your current partner or with, somebody new. The kindness looks very different, but we're still using the same term. So that belief is actually very malleable. And if it's serving, we know that kindness is probably addressing the 3-year-old with the time out and working with a partner by going out to dinner, right? It's a different thing. That's the malleableness of belief when it's serving us. Once again, we're working with this theme today, I think, of being malleable. Once again, if anyone's just joining, hopefully there's a chat pod on the right-hand side where you can type in questions. So far, only one person seems to have been successful to put a chat comment in there, which is unfortunate, because this seems like a cool tool. Anyway. And if you're also just joining us, taking a few deep breaths, so just relax inwards. And if you do have questions, feel free to ask them. Once again, hoping that the chat pod is there. Once again, I do want to emphasize that spiritual awakening isn't about being special. I think people are using that term too for a new way of saying better than, in some regards. They're better than other people. Most people who awaken weren't seeking it, as far as I know. I mean, every now and then there's some people where I wasn't really seeking it. I was just kind of following a certain level of openness that was arising inside me. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just keep on doing this thing, And, lo and behold, it was like, wow, look at what opened up inside me. I had no idea that this was coming. And while I understood that I'd had an awakening, I didn't really understand. I didn't really understand it, intuitively. I was just kind of figuring out as I went. So I'm always happy to be able to share some of this wisdom with you to help you along, to make it easier on you wherever you are in your path. But it doesn't matter if you're awakened or not. We all can embrace the conscious path. Now, I used this term earlier, and what I mean by that is that's the path of human growth, that we gradually change over time. Awakening is the connection to oneness, that everything is already perfect as it is. It seems like a paradox. And it's one of the many ways that, the mind that's trying to hold on to certain ideas about life is just going to have to quit. The more we come into that perfection of like this moment we're all sharing right now is absolutely perfect. And we relax into it. And we breathe into it. Then there tends to be this movement that arises inside that starts to grow in a certain way, that starts to change and evolve all on its own in a way that's divinely inspired and beautiful. It tends to feel way more true to us. Maybe not initially, because once again, we can be in really dark places and not know what healthy is like. But as you go and you really embrace that, you're dedicated to it, and this is a conscious path that happens, that evolving, we tend to grow into ways that feel truly perfect for ourselves. And once again, that perfection of the redwood tree is different than the blueberry bush or the pumpkin patch, right? You know, that your perfection, what that feels like. And it's not an experience in the sense of I always feel good. I love the work that I do, but I don't always feel good. I'm pretty tired today, actually. Right? That's part of my perfection right now. It's a certain level of fatigue and exhaustion that's been from all the big changes and the things that I've been growing through lately as I've pushed out my branches and grown. So that beauty of that awakened space is fertile ground for the changes that matter most. And if it gets easier to find those changes, and that's the conscious path where you say, okay, I am not happy in this marriage. I want a divorce. I am in love with this person. I want to make a deeper long-term commitment to this person. Like these types of things grow out of that space, and they're so truthful. And often I run up against a lot of fear initially because we don't think that's okay for whatever reason, whatever the lesson was. Whether it's a painful trauma or just the general cultural thing that says you don't get divorces, right? Whatever it happens to be, and you have to move through that to continue your growth. And there's a lot of sidestepping people attempt to do, but ultimately, if you're honest with yourself, you just have to go for it because it is your life. And you only get this one moment, this one time to be the you of this moment. Sounds like a little bit of circular logic, but I think you understand where I'm going. You are who you are right now. What you do with this life is up to you. And you can't sit around waiting for somebody to give you permission to be yourself. That's the irony of like spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening is the biggest, yes, you can be you, permission you can ever get in life. And yet so many of us fight it initially or think it's ruining something. But as you go, as some of you may already know, it's like, no, this is like the greatest gift of my life. Thank God that this came here. And it is such a thing of grace that comes from God and from within us. You know, it's that shared space where everybody gives the green light to say, yeah, let's wake up. And along with that stuff, there can be chronic fatigue. Everyone's different. There's sleep disruption. Some people who are naturally psychic become more psychic. That opens up. So I'm happy to answer any questions around those types of specific things. As you address the deeper issue that's being ignited, that's causing all these other problems, you know, a lot of those symptoms that everyone's talking about tend to go away. They don't tend to stick around forever. But, you know, they can be around for a while. I mean, the fatigue part for me lasted years. That was just how it was, because that was one of the ways that my divine intelligence knew it could keep me focused on the work I needed to do, among other things that were changing inside. Because if I had too much energy, I would go off and I'd do things, and I wouldn't be focusing enough energy inwards to burn out some of those inner issues that otherwise, as I said earlier, are happy to stay there. They're not going to go anywhere unless you really look at them. The closed heart tends to want to stay closed. I mean, we can be so closed-hearted we don't even realize we're closed. And somebody will come say, how are you feeling? I feel good. I know how to love people. And then after you work through a few issues, like I had no idea how to love people and I wasn't feeling good. And that's tends to be that hindsight that many of us have as we grow and we change. We're like, oh, wow, I did not know what I was talking about. So as you're sitting, you're breathing, relaxing into this moment. See if you can find that space of oneness within you. As I said, this is within all of us. It's not beyond any one of you. Just relaxing the body and seeing if you can notice that part of you that's noticing. There's a part of you that's watching your thoughts. It's watching the pulse in your body. It's feeling your feel. It's watching the feelings. That it is not the feeling itself. And that's a big distinction I want to make. Many people get really confused in a spiritual awakening, where they have this amazing blissful experience and think this is awakening. That is not awakening. That's a human experience. That tends to be a byproduct of letting go of all the other crap that you're holding on to and attempting to be. It's like suddenly all the walls of the prison cell get knocked down and there's all this fresh air and light. You're like, and for some people that becomes bliss. It's just incredible, right? Additionally, as we let the walls stay knocked down, there's a tendency to acclimate. And so this is kind of one of those things where like a high state experience, when we first have it, once it becomes your new plateau, it's just where you live. If you've been living in Hawaii your whole life, you're just living in Hawaii. But for somebody who's coming from like, you know, the Arctic Circle coming down, it's like, oh my gosh, right? You know, it's a huge shift. I was like, this is incredible. I want more of this. And then you stay there and then it's just, oh yeah, this is where I live. But it's not necessarily, you know, once again, the blissful high feeling, right? That's an agitated state. So it's not necessarily a resting state. As we come more into our inner space, it tends to move more towards kind of a level of peace and maybe understated bliss. But once again, that's an arising. It's a human experience that comes out of that space of oneness. And that space of oneness holds space for all experiences. And that includes fear, anger, sadness, guilt, and shame. And a lot of times, and all the other theories I have about this, the reason we have to experience so much of that stuff is because we avoided it. They're unpaid bills. They've been sitting on our desk for a long, long time. And those are the ones we have to pay. Whenever love and joy and ecstasy and orgasm came, we embraced those things. Most of us did, right? You know, so there's not as many of those bills hanging around, right? You know, those are like the envelopes where you open it, it's like $10 in it from like, you know, a relative. You're like, oh, fantastic. We usually open those pretty quickly. Once we saw that Aunt Luann sent us something on our birthday, we know she always sends us $10, we open that immediately. When the overdue bill for your car came, maybe not that one so much, which of course becomes a problem because you could potentially lose your car, you lose your mobility. And there's some truth to that. That when we don't deal with our fears and our sadnesses, we start to lose mobility within ourselves, within our lives. It becomes restrictive to hold on to that pain and to avoid that pain. So we start to have a lot of energy. That's the pain is one energy, and our resistance to it is another energy. And so this is how people can exhaust themselves. Some people, they kind of have an ego collapse and fall into awakening because they were just under so much pain or holding on to so much stuff that the ego just kind of fell in on itself. And for whatever reason, as opposed to just becoming lost in depression, awakening arises. I've heard that happen a couple of times, but that is not something I would encourage you to do. So I'm just taking a pause here. If anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to write in the chat on the right-hand side. Either that or it'll just be me and Jason talking, I guess, if he's the only one who can get to it. And I'm going to send up a follow-up email after this webinar just to see what everyone's experience is, because I'm not sure that I want to go with this. I like the live streaming thing, but if you can't talk back to me, it kind of defeats part of the purpose of this. Talk back in the sense of engage. But you can talk back to me. I mean, I don't have to be right about these things. That's once again the malleability of belief. It's like, if these beliefs don't work for you, then you don't have to hold on to them. But if they trigger something inside you, that's more interesting. So for those of you who are new to me, a trigger is when we get upset. We get angry, we get sad, we get, you know, upset in some sort of way based off of what someone says or does. And so long as somebody's not physically hurting you, Most of this is just triggering some issue inside of you. And that's something we want to be curious about, to become more conscious, because otherwise there's the part of you is telling you how to interact based off of that experience, as opposed to you actually making a choice. So let's say that you had a father who lectured you all the time. And so sitting here listening to me is triggering that father is lecturing me thing. And so you're getting angry. There's no need to be angry at me. And that's actually a way that, this issue will distance you from somebody who can be helpful to you. And this can happen with your boss, your partner, it can happen in all sorts of ways. That's one of the things about a trigger is it's going to show up in multiple places, not usually just one. So breathing in and start to explore, what are the feelings coming up? This feeling of being small, and I feel like I'm 8 years old again, right? Those are signs that you've been triggered, and you're starting to find out what the deeper issue is. And sometimes it's a series of ones, sometimes it's just kind of one issue or one time, and it's just stuck for whatever reason. And so you breathe into it, and now you're 8, and you feel that with your father, and then maybe some tears start to come up where you're upset, and that could be happening right now. And then as you breathe through it and you relax, then it goes away. Then how you feel about what I'm saying, your boss saying, your partner saying, suddenly it's not triggering you. And that's when you know the deeper issue is gone. So that's another way to be mindful of, our own beliefs, to make sure that we're mastering that first before we start to throw out what somebody else is saying. Just typing very quickly over in the chat, if anyone has any questions. Hopefully some of you can see that. Thanks for emailing that. Some people are using the chat pod, but apparently I'm not seeing it. This is strange. So one of the questions that come to me through email, this is how I'm reading it. This is a question of falling into old harming habits. Well, I think, we have to find out what our commitment to the old harming habits is. Why are we dropping back into these old ways of behaving and things like that? And to really explore it, be like, okay, so what's going on here that, has called my attention into it, that I want to interact in this particular way. Well, this is interesting. Okay, so yeah, I can see it now, but it's on a different thing than in the live dashboard that I was using. Okay, I can see everybody's questions. This is strange. So I see what everybody's been saying about the sound quality. Okay, I can see the chat pod. I don't know why there's a different thing here. Oh, well, live and learn, right? You're welcome, Debbie. Thanks for sending the email. I think some other people did too. So strange. Okay, so what questions do people have? I mean, I think there was a general question that came from Debbie around, falling into these old habits, and that's just so human, right? Because that's, once again, that's our old habits or old patterns that we're comfortable with, and we find that comforting. We think it's keeping us safe, but it isn't. It just kind of keeps us locked doing the same things over and over again. And we kind of have to find a certain way to get comfortable with the unknown, and really facing that fear of the unknown. It takes a lot of courage at first, but it's one of those necessary things to continue to grow and to continue to change and to find out what really matters to us. And as I said, the conscious path is something that we all have access to. There's just no way that we all can't grow and change, which I think is good news. That we all have access to this ability to change and to become something different than what we thought we had to be at first. And so there's such, once again, this wonderful flexibility and malleability. What is it? What are you saying about the unknown person that is really resonating with me tonight? I'm glad. I think there's all sorts of wonderful science out there about, a deeper, probably uh, instinctual way that the human being is terrified of the unknown, because if the unknown potentially could hurt you, you'd rather err on the side of, looking out for it rather than, assuming everything is fine. And this is an unfortunate kind of aspect of human beings. And I think it's something that, evolutionarily we have to rewrite, that we're not going to just be inherently scared of anything that's unknown. We can certainly bring more attention to something that's new and unknown. And, that's important, but not immediately assume that it's going to hurt us, which is kind of this deep implicit understanding that arises inside of us without us even really thinking about it. It's just like, whatever this new thing is bad. and that can be really true on so many levels, from the political level. If somebody offers new ideas that people are uncomfortable with, right? They're just afraid of the unknown. They're assuming immediately it's going to be bad. To anything else that may happen. And that, it takes away our creativity, our imagination, our ability to develop new things in life and for ourselves. And we have such amazing creative capacity that it's a shame that we do that. But, back in the instinctual days when, we couldn't think like this, we needed something to, get us prepared to run from any potential jaguars about to jump out and eat us when we were all iguanas or whatever. All right, so this is from Debbie. I'm new to having a spiritual teacher. So what would you say is about working with a spiritual teacher like yourself? I think it's basically to have an outside perspective from someone who loves you. And that the outside perspective is important, because there's plenty of people who love you, but they know you, and they're usually committed to their egos. Now, if you have some friends who are really deep into their spiritual work, that's beautiful, that's wonderful. But even so, having somebody who this is really their life's work is amazingly valuable to see things in ways that other people aren't looking at those things in those ways. Things like, sort of a question, let's look at romantic relationships. Why do we need them? Right? A lot of friends aren't going to ask that question. I will. And I'll help you kind of understand what's going on there. So that ultimately, if you choose to have a romantic partner, you're actually choosing to have a romantic partner. Because most of the times we're not choosing. We've been told again and again, this is what we're supposed to have. Our biology is telling us to procreate. Right? Even if you're not interested in someone of the opposite sex, right? All these things get built up, and it just becomes this common sense idea that this is what we do. So that's another thing that I do as a spiritual teacher, help people break out of myths of common sense, as well as just an energy to the work that I share with people. And that tends to move things in surprising ways that I'm not sure too many other relationships do. So obviously I'm biased, Debbie, so you can take that all with a grain of salt, but that's been my experience. And I know some other people in this chat room who've worked with me directly, and they can speak more directly to it and how they feel about it. Hi, Pam. Why do we hold on to sad or painful events, memories, even though I know this is not helpful? I think that goes back to the biology thing again, right? Where we're holding on to the thing that hurts us as kind of preparation to be able to find the next thing that might hurt us and prepare for it so that we can avoid it and not be hurt again, if that makes sense. So there's this very self-protective thing about the ego, where we're trying to find ways to protect ourselves from something that might hurt. And we're usually wrong a lot. the ego tends to be wrong an exceedingly large amount of the time. It's just not correct. But that tends to be the tendency, that we think that, if by holding on to it, we're going to be able to prepare for the next thing and to keep it from happening again, so we don't get hurt again. So part of the work that we do on the conscious path is to open to sense, open to pain, but to drop into that place where we're witnessing. It's like we're allowing ourselves to have the experience. That's the human side. That's the duality side. We're dropping in the space of the witness. That's the space of oneness that allows every experience that you can have, Pam, And in that allowance, that is the space that allows this stuff to transition. And any realizations or epiphanies or even an awakening that wants to arise from that space can. Every now and then somebody will talk about, and it's often a letting go thing, I think, that they let go of something that really mattered to them. Like I think once or twice for a couple of my students, it's been letting go of a partner. And they really wanted it, and it didn't work out. And for whatever reason, for them, the way everything just kind of exploded and the way they let go, suddenly like the next day they wake up and it's like they're awake. And of course, don't really know what that means, but that's how it often is. Thanks for the questions. What other questions or thoughts do people have now that I can see where things are? Oh, I'm learning some stuff. Here's another way I can open up these live chat pod questions. Fantastic. All right, maybe I will stick with this depending on what everybody thinks about the audio and the sound compared to the other webinar tool I was using. Does anyone have other questions? Oh, the audio broke down when I was talking about relationships. It's kind of a bummer. Oh well, such is technology. It's all kind of a work in progress. I think that's kind of a good point to end on tonight too. That, as far as the perfection and the oneness, that simply is. Being a human being is a work in progress. All right, well, I think that's enough of this experiment tonight. If nobody has any other further questions, so we'll close it here. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to continue to probably explore this live streaming thing. There are other different tools that go on in the background that I can try and use. But thanks for everyone for bearing with me, exploring this topic with me, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your night.